5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Puck short.
Hello everyone and welcome to a brand new episode of the One Puck Short podcast. It is Wednesday, the 3rd of February 2016. Adrian Dater of the Bleacher Report will be joining me shortly to talk about the All Star weekend, Dennis Wideman suspension and the Colorado Avalanche. But before we get to Adrian, just a couple of other news and notes from around the NHL. NHL Game Centre Live has switched to become NHL.tv. Not the smoothest of transitions so far. The website's had a bit of a facelift as well, which people are split on. I think I like some elements of it. It is cleaner, but some bits that I got so used to being able to find easily are not quite as accessible yet. I'm sure I'll get used to it. But there's improvements there. I quite like that the player stat screens have changed. Again, they look a bit cleaner, and I feel like it's a little bit smoother finding certain information as well. So yeah, interesting to see how that pans out. I know, as I said, a few people have had problems with the NHL TV change where it's not correctly recognised that they've already paid and things like that, and some of the Vault stroke archive elements aren't either apparent or there as they were before. So it's an odd time to change, I think, February 1st. Maybe I get that they want to do it in time to get these teething problems out of the way before the playoffs, but equally doing it in season strikes me as a little bit odd as they team up with MLB AM for this new partnership which is behind all this and these changes. So interesting changes on that side of things for the NHL, and as I said, not everybody's wild about it. I like some features, I don't like others. The app's also updated, and because I've chosen favourite teams and teams to follow, it sort of centralises around them, which I kind of liked it before when it was a bit more generic for me. Maybe I just need to unfollow those teams. But interesting changes, and I'm keen to see how they pan out and how they polish these changes up and improve on it, because I think there's a lot of potential there. It's just sort of in its infancy since the change, and I guess a lot of sites go through this. But on ice news, Kevin Klein out indefinitely for the New York Rangers with a fractured thumb. Not ideal for the Rangers. They're holding on to second spot in the Metropolitan Division right now, and nobody's catching Washington in that division. The Caps have 74 points, and they have 2 games in hand on the Rangers, who are, as I said, second with 59 points. So that gives you an idea of how dominant Washington have been in that division. I mean, they're 9 points clear at the top of the East. So, nobody's catching the Caps, but the danger for the Rangers, especially with Klein out, their defence hasn't been great at times this year. We've talked before about Dan Girardi and Mark Stahl as well. The use of Keith Yandel has been questioned by a lot of Rangers fans, and especially at the moment when the power play hasn't been as strong. With the Rangers now 59 points, as I said. The Islanders have 2 games in hand. They're on 58 points. The Penguins, though, this is maybe the key one, 49 games played, 57 points. So if they win that game in hand, they're level on points with the Rangers, and they would pass the Islanders as well, though, again, the Islanders have a game in hand on the Pens. So there's all that to factor in. But, the Rangers could get bogged down a little bit in this, and some of their star guys haven't done as well. Rick Nash is also day-to-day at the moment. Maybe that changes. I don't know the severity of the injury, but losing Klein is not ideal for a team that's not been brilliant in its own end. He got slashed by New Jersey's Reed Boucher, and this is the second time Klein's hurt that same thumb. Apparently, he blocked a shot on January 16th, but he didn't miss a particularly long period of time for that one. But as I said, the Rangers are in a fight to maintain their place in the top 3 and perhaps even their place in the postseason. So losing Kevin Klein like that is not ideal. But the Edmonton Oilers got Connor McDavid back. That's a huge recovery, or what's the word to use? Acquisition is the wrong word, but it's big. It's big for their lineup. There we go. So whether it really helps them right now, probably not. But I think they'll be glad to have McDavid back, just to sell a little hope, because they're bottom of the West once again. They've got 45 points, which is now where are we? 29th worst record in the NHL. Only Buffalo and Columbus have got fewer points. Toronto have got the same, 45, so that may change. But the Oilers have played more games at the moment. And they won 5-1 against the Blue Jackets last night, who I just mentioned have the worst record in the NHL. And the big thing with McDavid is getting some ice time with him, maybe getting some cohesion with line mates, and as I said, selling hope again, because that was the big thing with landing McDavid is after all the years of, even though they've had all these first overall picks, all the years of hurt and suffering and frustration and anger at the team's management, they changed the coaching staff, brought Todd McClellan in, brought Pete Chiarelli as GM, and they landed Connor McDavid, who's the biggest prospect since Crosby probably, and so that was significant for them. And then losing him to that broken clavicle hurt their chances of making the playoffs, and obviously they're in the mix again now for Austin Matthews, which would just be gross if they won the lottery again. But we'll see. I mean, they could be in line for a top pick, so maybe they have a shot at someone like Puljujärvi or Jacob Chychrun or Alex Nylander. But as I said, I think the big thing for getting McDavid back is it sells hope again in Edmonton, which is needed really after many years of frustration and difficulty. All right, let's have a quick advert, and then I'll be joined by Adrian. One Puck Short is brought to you in association with Eastside Hockey Manager, an in-depth ice hockey management simulation brought to you by Sports Interactive and Sega, developers of the world-famous Football Manager series, available now for PC via Steam. Joining me now on the One Puck Short podcast, NHL columnist for Bleacher Report. Please welcome to the show, Mr. Adrian Dater. Hi, Adrian. How are you?
Good, thank you, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Hey, no, thanks for coming on. Just back yesterday from the All Star weekend in Nashville. How was your experience in Tennessee this year?
Excellent, great weather, good times. Nashville is, normally considered not hockey paradise, but it was for a weekend there, and it was, just great. I mean, the weather was good, which helped. It's not usually that great this time of year there, I guess, and everything went off without a hitch. Of course, we had a Hollywood story to have it all go down with, and no, it was excellent. I even got to tour an old Civil War Southern mansion, which is kind of a hobby of mine, and I like Civil War buff, so it all worked great for me.
What was your take on the whole John Scott situation? Because I think that was one of the key elements for the weekend success. Everybody wanted to see how he got on, and it was such a feel-good story in the end. This is a guy who's beaming from ear to ear all weekend, and it just seemed like a real positive in the end.
Well, it was. I mean, I think everybody expected kind of a sideshow, and it turned out to be just a Hollywood ending. It just could not have gone any better for John Scott. I mean, A, he played well. B, I don't think the NHL will ever allow this thing to happen again.
Yeah.
But because they got lucky, let's face it, they didn't want him there. They tried to stop it, and in a way, in an ironic twist, the story wouldn't have been as good without the NHL being kind of a villain in the whole thing. Every good story needs a heel, and they were the villain, and he overcame the villain, and righteousness triumphed overall, and it at the end, the NHL gained all the monetary rewards for this.
Yeah.
Sold more jerseys, had better ratings. So now I'm sure they're happy this all happened. But for most of the time, we all thought it would be kind of a joke. And it turned out to be great for everybody involved.
Yeah.
I don't think the odds are great that it'll ever happen again. It's like the old saying, you couldn't have, if he'd written a script like that, nobody would have believed it. But it happened, and it was in the end, it was a great story.
Yeah, I know a few people said they were surprised that the NHL didn't nix the fan vote after the whole Zygmunt Girgensons thing, when basically all of Latvia tried to vote him into they did vote him in.
Yeah.
So I think you're probably right though. This will be the swan song perhaps of the fan vote, or they'll change it so you can only vote for a pool of guys or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, as you said, it was a great story in the end, and it's a good point about the NHL being kind of the pantomime villain in this piece. So it was generally positive all round. I think 3-on-3 worked pretty well for the new format.
Yeah, and that's another thing that people probably didn't expect was the irony is that 3-on-3 hockey actually made it more defensive hockey. Yeah. It allowed the goaltenders to really show their skill. Too often in the All Star games, it's lazy skating down the wings with five guys sort of half-heartedly trying to play defense and kind of a setup pass here and there for a goal. And this was actual hockey. It was goaltending. They were forced to be active,
Yeah.
They were forced to face real scoring opportunities every time down, and that was the best part of it. The All Star innovation was the 3-on-3. I mean, it really just, and the fact that they were playing for something obviously helped the competitive level. I don't care what anybody says. $91,000 for a day's pay is something that NHL players will fight over.
Yeah.
So that was their reward for the day, and it just created a much more competitive atmosphere. But it was just it was great because it really did force the goalies to show their skills, which we've never really seen before in an All-Star game, and that was. And we still saw, all the offensive skill we're ever going to see too, and more so with the 3-on-3. But this time the goalies were involved, and that really gave it a great boost. Yeah,
for sure. It seems to have been a success all around, and hopefully it's a building block to make the All-Star weekend a bit more meaningful again moving forward, because it kind of fallen flat for a lot of people.
Really flat. I mean, there was nothing worse than covering the All-Star game and watching the All-Star game and everything else about it. I mean, the one at Columbus last year was a travesty. It was just a monstrosity of an event, and they had to do something, and they pushed all the right moves. Doing it. John Scott notwithstanding, it would have been a success without him. With the format.
Yeah. Before we get to the Avs, Adrian, I just want to get your take on the whole Dennis Wideman situation, because his ban's been announced today. 20 games. He'll forfeit more than $500,000. And it's a really bizarre situation. The whole thing from the get-go was just so strange. The hit he took in the corner against the Preds, obviously the contact with the linesman. I mean, what was your take on the situation then, and how do you feel about the ban?
I think it's appropriate. I mean, you got to protect the officials no matter what. I mean, it didn't look good optically that it was, it didn't look good for Wideman's case that he claimed that he made. Okay, let's say he was dazed and confused by the hit. He took an awfully long time to skate over the bench. He had an awfully long time to see what was in front of him, and he raised his arms and cross-checked him in the back. I mean, it didn't look like somebody who was caught in the freak of the moment.
Yeah.
It's a quick thing where he just may have taken let's say he took a huge hit on the boards. He gets right up and hits the nearest thing. That wasn't the case here. He had that long skate to the bench. That's what looked most damning for him. I thought his explanation after the game was a little too, I don't know, nonchalant maybe.
Yeah.
The word about it. He seemed to be like, he knows it was an accident, and I apologize, and that's that. Everybody should move on. I thought he should have sounded a little more sorry than he was.
Yeah.
The guy spent the night in the hospital. That was another factor. So 20 games is what's in the rule book for hitting an official. I think he's lucky he didn't get more. And, in this case, the rules are the rules, and he's going to have to do the time for this crime.
Yeah. I mean, to me, I think the whole head injury or the fogginess and that kind of grey area maybe saved him from more games, but equally, the Flames leaving him in the game probably doesn't help that case.
Right, exactly.
If they're keeping him in the game, they're saying he doesn't need to go and have quiet time and all this stuff, and then that's against NHL protocol. And
that's right.
Yeah, so I don't think that's going to help him on appeal either. I think the Flames keeping him in is probably going to hurt his cases there. And Gary Bettman's not going to throw an official, I'd say, under the bus, for lack of a better term. He's just not. He's going to back his officials because he has to.
And you know what? Your officials are going to, if they didn't do this, if they didn't protect the official, you run the risk of the officials doing all kinds of stuff in retaliation. I mean, let's say they go on a slow down strike, so to speak. Don't call as many things. They have their power too. So I'm sure they're happy, quote unquote, happy with the verdict. And I don't think it's going to stand up on appeal either. I think it's a loser case for Wideman, and he should I think just graciously say, look, I was wrong and I have to do my time, because it didn't look accidental.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let's move to the Avalanche. You've covered Colorado for a long time, written 2 books, and it's a strange time for this team. To me, they started very poorly. Now they're in the first wild card spot. They've recovered pretty well, but a lot of people think it's based on some pretty good goaltending from Varlamov and Pickard lately as well, and there's also some opportunistic scoring. I mean, are this team capable of securing a playoff spot, or is it a bit of a toss-up and they'll be around the bubble?
Well, I think they're going to be in the mix, and they're capable of it. But they better get their act together as far as scoring goes. Again, they're not scoring again. They looked terrible last night against Chicago. I know it's the Blackhawks and everything, but coming out of the All Star break, you think they would be a little more energetic than they were, and they were flat all night. I mean, the team without Jonathan Toews in the lineup, they got manhandled. And only Pickard's good goaltending kept it from being a true blowout. This Varlamov is not going to play tomorrow against Dallas too, so that'll be 4 straight games he'll have missed because of the civil trial, which he won yesterday. And that's hurt too. If they've lost. Let's see, they've lost 2 of the 3 games so far that Varlamov's missed. They kind of had to pull a miracle out of their hat to win the other one. So. They need Varlamov back. That's key. He's been their guy who's brought them back into this thing. And they need a couple other guys to get it going again. Nathan MacKinnon's one of them. 3rd-year player, got decent numbers. Nice numbers, I guess, but. He was a no-show last night too, and he's got to be better than that. He's got too much talent to keep going one game where he scores a goal and he goes 3 or 4 more without getting one. He's got to be more consistent. I think he's a huge key to this team going down the stretch. I think if Nathan MacKinnon can dig deeper and get on a real hot streak, I think the Avs' chances going into the playoffs go up, 25-30%.
Yeah, I mean, McKinnon's second in team scoring right now, 18 goals and 41 points. At 1 point behind Matt Duchene, who, again, started the year pretty slowly. He ended up in the trade rumour mill in early November, went on an incredible hot streak, and now leads the team in both goals and points. But he's maybe cooled slightly. He's a guy who was perfectly at home in Nashville this weekend, but he seems to be another one who's having these hot and cold streaks, and if he's hitting another cold streak now, that seems like a pretty poor time for him to hit a cold streak.
Yeah, he wasn't great last night, that's for sure. He had a nice goal in LA the game before that, but I'm not worried about him. I think he'll be fine down the stretch. He's a good player. He wants to succeed. He really wants to get the Avs in the playoffs and be known as a leader. I think he'll have good motivation. Couple other guys. I mean, they've got Eric Johnson's he's back again from his injury. He's got to be a little bit better than he's been. His skating looks a little off. Maybe his injuries still bother him some. He's got to be better. They need more out of, let's say, a Jerome McGinley, who moved down to the 3rd line.
Yeah,
and is a worry. He's a guy that. They signed gave a lot of money toward, and if he starts falling down to 3rd and 4th, even 4th line minutes, it means other guys are going to have to pick up the slack, and so far that hasn't quite happened in the last few games. So if Ginla can find some scoring touch again, that would help. He's at like a minus 19 on the year. His defensive play is starting to become a little bit of a glaring weakness, and Alex Tanguay definitely looks a little slower, hasn't played very well. Those kind of guys, if they can, but they're capable, I think, of going on a 2-week stretch where they can play well, and if that happens, and once you get in the playoffs, if you got a goalie like Varlamov, weird things can happen.
Yeah, and they kind of saw that maybe with Craig Anderson a few years ago. He was absolutely fantastic that year against San Jose. The Sharks won the series, but Anderson gave him a fighting chance in that one.
Yep.
Is it a case that some of the guys maybe that they were going to lean on to perform haven't at times this year? I mean, Carl Soderberg has picked up lately, but Tanguay you mentioned there, Grigorenko I kind of expected a little bit more from perhaps, and as you mentioned, Iginla, who's always been a slow starter, but he hasn't found that sort of second half of the season pace that he found when he was a younger man.
Yeah, well, Ginla started off fine, and he's tailing off. Kind of the opposite of what he does. He's 37 years old. He always, once you hit that age, everybody's just waiting for that moment to say, "Aha, you've lost it." It's just something he has to deal
Yeah.
with. I think he'll still score some goals down the stretch. He's still good on the power play or that one timer from the left side. He'll get some goals. You know, it's up to the top guys, though. I mean, they need to do the work. Duchene, McKinnon, Landeskog, those guys up front need to carry the load, and they're never going to be great defensively with their roster still the way it is. It would be nice to see, how. Well, to me, it's going to be interesting to see how guys like Big Rod does down the stretch, the rookie defenseman who's stuck around the roster with Johnson's coming back, which is a big sign that he's going to have some huge responsibility in the stretch. To me, he's a huge wild card thing for this team. The bottom line is, though, that if the Avs don't make it again, it'll be something like 7 of the last 8 years they haven't made the playoffs.
Yeah.
It's the days of excuses are over. It'll be the young. They're young, learning, etc., etc. No, that excuses will go out the window pretty much. Matt Duchene is not just a kid anymore. This is his 7th year. Landeskog's his 5th or 6th year. These guys have got running out of excuses on that, and they need to prove that they can actually do this thing. At least get in the playoffs. I mean, unfortunately for the Avs, that year 2 years ago is looking more and more like a fluke every year. So I think it's 6 out of 8 years that they wouldn't have made it, because they made it in 13, they made it in 08. That's it. Or 10, I'm sorry. Yeah, my math is always wrong. I think it's 3 years since 2008 they've made the playoffs. Okay, well, there were a couple before that they didn't either. So anyway, they've been, let's face it, a loser franchise for a few years now, and they've they had that one sparkling, everything went right Cinderella year, Patrick Baugh's first year, and then they lost in the first round. I think it's going to be a great story either way. I'm really interested to see how this team responds, because one of the criticisms I've had of the Avs the last couple of years is that we don't see them step up in key moments. Their young leaders haven't gotten it done in too many times, and this is another big test for guys like Duchene, for Landeskog, and and Johnson. Those guys, we'll see what they're really made of. Again, they have another chance to prove that they're better than just an also-ran team.
Yeah, I mean, is there any sense around the club what they might do towards the trade deadline at the end of this month, whether there'll be a seller or a buyer, or does it very much depend on what happens over the next sort of 3-4 weeks?
It's going to depend, but I'll tell you what, the trade deadline is not what it used to be. It's just not without the salary cap.
Yeah, for sure.
Everybody sort of has this still picture of the trade deadline as this frenzy, free-for-all, but it's not. The salary cap eliminated it. The most trade deadline days we've seen have been duds these last few years. You get just sort of one medium-sized deal, like a Thomas Vanek or something like that, or for a draft pick.
Yeah.
But otherwise, there's no more blockbusters. If there are blockbusters, they tend to happen before the deadline, well before. That's when teams, and it's a good reason why, because too many times at trade deadline, you make that big deal, and they don't have enough time to acclimate themselves to the team if you do it only a month before the playoffs.
Yeah.
And it's too many times it's ended in failure. And it's better to do that earlier and get that player used to it 2 to 3 months with your team than before. So I think the Avs, even if they're quote unquote sellers, I don't think they're going to sell a lot. I know Jerome McGinley is your guy that everybody would look to trade, but he has said to me that he won't approve any trade. He's got a no move clause, and no matter what, he does not want to move his family anywhere to to quote unquote be a rental player for a cup team.
Yeah.
You got to wonder how many cup teams would really want Jerome McGinley as a 37-year-old missing piece too. So I think that window is passed for him too to be that guy. Tanguay, no, nobody's going to take Tanguay at $3.5 million a year. I think he's got another year on his deal too. Maybe
UFA. He is a UFA this summer. So.
Oh, he is UFA.
Yeah.
See, that's why I should listen to your podcast more and rely on my. I'm not covering the team day by day anymore, so I don't know all that stuff. So he's UFA. Well, no, I still don't see a contender adding Tanguay as a missing piece. He hasn't been good enough this year. He's obviously a candidate who could be moved if somebody wants to really take a bite, but they're not going to trade young picks for some rental player of their own, I don't think, unless it's just some crazy deal that somebody's offering. I mean, let's say that, Winnipeg, let's just say, conjecture something that won't happen, but let's say it could, Winnipeg offers Dustin Byfuglien for two second round picks or something. All right, maybe the Avs do something like that if that's the offer, but I still don't think they'd do that. They don't want to part with their view of their vision of building, getting younger, building from within, and adding pieces around free agency. The way they're doing things now is they've been more active in free agency the last couple of years. I mean, they were pretty active this past year with Soderberg and all. So, and again, the year before that. Trades are just harder to make, and it's all because of the cap. And either way, I don't see a lot of big things happening.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the cap there. There's obviously some key restricted free agents. McKinnon, who we've spoken about, Tyson Barrie as well, who's been pretty good on the blue line again. Grigorenko's an RFA. There's other guys, there's sort of fringe players like Chris Wagner, Andreas Martinson as well. So, they've got $7 million nearly $7.5 million in space right now, but they're at their 50 contract limit, so there are decisions to be made there. I mean, I wondered about Jack Skilly as a rental for someone, but he's not going to garner a lot in return.
No, not at all. I mean, don't forget they've got Rantanen coming up again next year. Sure. If not later in the year, that's a good debate topic. I think should they recall Rantanen for the stretch? I can be talked into that if necessary. I mean, he's tearing it up down in the minors. But the Avs, the only guy you could say that I mean. Two prospects that they could theoretically dangle to get better and trade are a Big Raw, or he's probably not going to get much, but Duncan Siemens remains a number 11 pick from just a couple of 3 years ago. Maybe there's a team that thinks it can rebuild him, but boy, has he been a disappointment so far.
For sure.
And pretty much led to the ouster of Chief Scout Rick Tracy from his job from that pick. That Duncan Siemens pretty much cost Rick Tracy his job, unfortunately, the pick that has not worked out.
Yeah, and with Brandon Gormley in the system now, who's only a year older than Siemens, again, maybe it makes Duncan Siemens expendable in that respect. And of course, they've got Nikita Zadorov in the minors as well. So
I know.
They've got a few young guys kicking around.
Gave up Ryan O'Reilly to get him. So there's a lot of pressure on that kid, too.
Yeah, I mean, that situation was brewing for a while. I mean, the return they got for O'Reilly, given the situation, given that Zadorov was considered a pretty good defensive prospect, Grigorenko's still a young guy as well and pretty well thought of. I mean, Grigorenko's 21. The return they got, do you think that was the best they were going to get for O'Reilly?
You can argue that it wasn't. I mean, it's funny. If you remember on draft day last year, it seemed like Joe Sakic and Patrick Waugh just all of a sudden ambled over to the Sabres trade table and talked to Tim Murray. It was like it all happened really fast. It didn't seem like there was much in the works for a while, I don't think, that I'd heard. All of a sudden you have this deal that just happened all of a sudden.
Yeah.
I'd love to know how that deal really went down as far as, the mechanics of it and how fast it occurred, because it seemed like it was a little hasty in a way, even though we all thought O'Reilly was going to be dealt at some point. On the other hand, you get a first-round pick, defenseman, young guy. You get a 21-year-old former first-round pick. I can argue that that's about as good as you're probably going to get for O'Reilly in this kind of world. 2 young guys you can take a chance on. I wouldn't give up on Zadorov by any means just yet, although he has not looked really good to me. He looks. He doesn't look. He's just not as very steady with the puck. He's definitely got to cut down on his turnovers and just be smarter with it. Otherwise, you're looking at. God, if they another blown defensive prospect, they've had a few too many of those in recent years. So, anyway, I want to rambling on a bit. I think they just, they've had some hits and misses and trades, and I think the jury's still out on the O'Reilly deal. But I think for now we can say that look, there's still plenty of potential there for the Avs. Even O'Reilly was an All Star and playing very well for Buffalo. Hasn't made it look good optically so far in some ways for the Avs.
Yeah. What about between the pipes? Because we talk about names cropping up in rumours. Varlamov has cropped up occasionally on the rumour mill. He's got another 3 years after this one. Calvin Pickard's an RFA, and of course Reto Berra is currently injured but has one more year. And Berra was pretty good before his injury. So, yeah. I mean, I don't envisage them moving Varlamov, but Pickard and Berra have played well. Do they try and form some sort of 1A, 1B tandem there and maybe cash in on Varlamov at some point?
I don't think so. I think Varlamov's going to be their guy. I think Pickard's shown nice things, but he's also shown that he can get lit up pretty quick. 6 goals the other night in San Jose. Okay, I know he was sick, but a couple softies here and there too. I just think that goaltending is, you got to have such confidence in your guy that, and I don't think that Pickard or Berra is there. I think Berra had a nice, little month, 3-week stretch or whatever it was.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm just not I would definitely be clutching the pearls if I was a Avs fan and he was my number one guy. I'm just, I think I've seen too many nights where he's just not having it.
Yeah.
To get excited about that kind of thing. On the other hand, yeah, a guy like Varlamov is a kind of guy that could get you something in return if you do want to deal him. So I think that's always going to be natural that he could crop up in a rumor. That said, I think that as long as Patrick Waugh's here, I think he's gonna want a guy he really feels some confidence in, and that's going to be Varlamov.
Yeah, I mean, on that note, kind of how much rope do Sakic and Patrick Waugh have? Do they have an endless piece of rope from management because they're such legends around the club, or is there pressure on Waugh in particular, because it's normally the coach that gets canned first when things don't go right? I mean, is he on the hot seat? Is he anywhere near it, or is it just the case of, he's Patrick Waugh and this is the Avs and they'll give him more rope than they might the next guy?
No, he's not on the hot seat at all. He's got as much rope as he wants, I think. He's also got that front office title, don't forget. He's part of management.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
The only way Patrick Waugh is going to leave the Avalanche is if he decides to step down or move do something else. I just can't even ever foresee, a Josh Kroenke or a Sakic actually firing him. They'll kick him upstairs or do something more. It would be some kind of orchestrated thing where Patrick takes a higher level job or something and says that he was getting burned out or something. It's never going to be that he was just outright fired, though. No way. He's too much a legend here. Josh Kroenke would defer way too much to him in any event. He's not a hockey guy. He's just going to say, look, he's going to feel like he's lucky to have Waugh around no matter what, I think.
Yeah.
Because, the fact is, they made the playoffs. He won the Jack Adams his first year. He didn't make the playoffs the second year, but they had 90 points. And they had a winning record, technically. And they've got a winning record this year in the wild card team. So no, he's if anything, he's going to get an extension.
Yeah.
He's going to be here a lot longer than anybody probably realizes. He's not going anywhere if he doesn't want to.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you very much for joining me today, Adrian. It's been great to have you on and have a chat about the Avalanche. And I think it's one of the more intriguing stories heading down the final straight as to whether they can hold on and what happens both in the remainder of this season, but also in the summer with those key RFAs coming up.
Well, great to be with you, Rob. Thanks for having me, and nice to talk some hockey in the UK here.
Yeah, thanks, Adrian. Take care.
Okay, take care.
One.
Puck short.
And that about wraps it up for this week's show. Thanks again to Adrian for joining me. You can follow him on Twitter at @Dater, and of course you can find him on Bleacher Report, as I mentioned at the top of that segment. A little bit of housekeeping from my end of things. Of course, you can always find the blog on puckshort.wordpress.com, and a couple of new articles go up on there this week. Thanks to Justin Bourne for letting me bring back the beerability rankings. Some of you may remember these from the Score when Justin was still there. Obviously, he's now gone over to work with the Toronto Marlies as part of their coaching team. But he was kind enough to let me pick up the beerability format, so I did a special All Star Weekend edition of that. I also asked 5 questions of various teams, including the Avs, as the NHL enters the final stretch. New writer has joined the team, Ivis Carlins. Some of you may follow him on Twitter for UKHL News. He's joined One Puck Short, and his first piece looks at the possibility that it is Neil Black, owner of the Nottingham Panthers and Braehead Clan, who is looking to bring a Continental Hockey League team to the UK. Some of you may remember me talking about that on a recent episode, as well as the blog piece that I picked up on after the KHL All Star game. So you can check out Ivis' first piece for One Puck Short, and he'll have more on the KHL over the coming weeks. So that's all at onepuckshort.wordpress.com. If you want to get in touch with the blog or the podcast, you can email onepuckshort@gmail.com. Any questions, comments, thoughts from the NHL, the British game, Europe, or whatever you want to get off your chest, that's how you can get us by email. You can find me on Twitter at RobMcGregor35. You can also like us on Facebook, facebook.com/onepuckshort. If you are so inclined, you can help support the show via our PayPal donation link. You can find that on the blog, just on the right-hand side. There's also an Amazon affiliate link. And basically, if you're doing a shop at Amazon, go through our affiliate link, you shop as normal. It doesn't cost you a penny extra. When you hit pay at the checkout, we get a little kickback from Amazon. It all goes towards running the blog and the podcast. So thanks again, everybody, for listening this week. Thanks to my guest, Adrian Dater, and I'll speak to you all again very soon.